landscape architecture program, spent an entire semester visiting a list of farms that I had given them, video, photographs. The footage is unbelievable.
Jersey City's been put up there, or will be put up there, right?
So yeah, I have to look. The students are kind of taking on all of that stuff, but it's outrageous. I think they're going to do some more stuff. There's a bunch of farms that they didn't even get a chance to visit. I mean, there's endless amounts going on. It's just about organizing it all.
Well, thank you for doing that and taking that task on. Melina, you want to
Well, good afternoon. As you can hear, I'm not from the United States, and that has an impact on my story with food. Like many people, when I first started a family and I found myself responsible for what was initially a perfectly formed human being, I didn't want to impart any damage on that human being, and so as I started looking at food, I knew I wanted to avoid GMOs. And I find it really interesting that we've been here for hours now, and GMOs have not featured in any of the conversations when it is such a big area of discussion right now in the food world. And by food world, I mean all of us, because we all eat.
I think it was in the morning session, so people have to get back to it.
Okay, so I want to avoid GMOs. Why? Because I don't know anything about their safety. Any studies that have been done by the people who are making them, which makes them not objective studies, as far as I'm concerned. I do know that the consequence of using GMOs will be an impact on the amount of pesticides and herbicides in my food, and I do know that I want to avoid that. And when I came to the States from England, there was no way to know what was genetically modified and what wasn't. So the only way to avoid it was to go organic. And that's what I've done as best I can, but the economics of organic food have been prohibitive for myself and many others, and I wanted to address that. Along the way of addressing that, I've had a long journey of self-education. I've learned things like our food choices have an enormous impact on the world, all of the world, our planet. Our planet is our large community that we're responsible for. For every pound of beef produced here in the United States, 12 pounds of grain is required. And that is just a bizarre, fuzzy logic to me. Like, why would I knowingly reduce 12 pounds of potential food into 1 pound of food? My fundamental belief is that we as human beings have a duty of care to others, just by existing. And so for me, other human beings is my larger family. In the same way I have my sense of responsibility to my children, I as a human being have a sense of responsibility to everybody else. So with my area of speciality being food, it made sense to me that my contribution to sustainability and to social justice should be food activism. And that's how I've ended up standing here in front of you today. And everything I do in food activism, every project I set out to try and achieve, part of what I'm thinking about is, I don't want this to be an entirely personality-driven program, which if the personality disappears, the program disappears too. A lot of volunteer-based work that happens. If I've seen community gardens, school gardens, all kinds of things come and go when people come and go. So everything I set up, I'm trying to create a template that's replicable for other people to be able to pick up and utilize elsewhere without the dependency on whoever's created something. Obviously, in this case, it's been me. Food is the basic foundation for everything. We all eat. It's a universal connection. And we aren't machines. We like to think of ourselves as more interesting, more complex than machinery. And so our food should be more than fuel. When we sit down with strangers and break bread, those strangers can become friends. When you put two enemies at a table and they're eating together, that is a neutral area for them to be sitting at. And perhaps it's a possibility of an opening for dialogue. When you have children eating at school, food is a fuel that will help them concentrate and focus. Why do we accept lousy school lunches when we wouldn't accept a lousy math curriculum? When we wouldn't be accepting of an English program which didn't teach people to read and write? So why do we accept crappy lunch? I say we shouldn't. And the other piece of this is that we have become so disconnected from our food that we need to reconnect. So then I asked myself, well, how can I help do that? What can I do with other people to make that change happen? Or what is one way? So one avenue was something called guerrilla gardening. And guerrilla gardening for me is my series of lutions. There's the evolution, where you have a series of small changes, which leads to revolution, a fundamental systemic change. It addresses the convolution of our current food system and reduces it to create an access to affordable, healthy food. That is something very complicated and difficult right now, and it shouldn't be. We need to bring it back and keep it simple. So to do that, we need devolution. We need to take back the power from central government to local people and empower local people to grow their own. And one solution to that is guerrilla gardening. I was very fortunate that I had a good friend who is now sadly no longer with us, who was an incredible gardener. And I was a well below average gardener. I had arguments with my resident groundhog population. I had disputes with my inertia when it came to watering, my complete laziness when it came to soil analysis, and she grew enough food to feed our whole town. So I went to her and I said, teach me everything you know, step by step, as if I have never picked up a seed in my life. And she did. And I noted how we did it, and I ended up with a step-by-step process that the most gardening-phobic person could use. And from that, I built a template to pay that knowledge forward. So we started with 10 pioneer planters, 10 people starting seeds. When you get a seed pack, there are maybe 24 or 30 seeds of one variety of a plant. And none of us need, even if we only manage to grow half of that packet, none of us need a dozen of one variety of tomato. But it would be great if we could keep 2 or 3 and share the others with someone. So by having 10 people starting a series of plants and supporting and enabling and empowering them to grow them into seedlings, we then had thousands of plants that we could share, literally thousands of plants, and we did that. We had a community swap. And through that community swap in our town, we started to build an edible landscape. We shared with schools, and in schools it helped create a connection from the classroom to homes, because the elementary school children that we worked with learned in the classroom how to grow something. They felt so powerful that they were in charge of this little seed that turned into a food-bearing plant, and they took it home. And with it they took home nutrition education for their families. And those families not only had something to eat from, but they had a connection with their kids' day in the classroom, which not all of them had. Any of you who work in education know one of the biggest difficulties we have is making that connection between the family and the school for the families where the kids are most at risk. And here was a way that we were bringing the class into the home in a completely non-threatening and supportive way. We also connected with community farms and community gardens. We had so many plants that we could share, and other people who had started plants themselves would bring them in and swap them. So the kale guy gave us kale, and he took home some tomatoes because he hadn't grown any. And the zucchini lady came home, brought zucchini, and she went home with maybe some cucumbers or whatever it was. It was just great. And it was really simple and really affordable and really replicable. So this year, we're going to hopefully offer it here in Jersey City, if we can get Jersey City would like to be on board. Our neighbouring 3 towns all want to do this. And we can do small pilots, which are manageable financially and logistically, and make this massive difference. We had people so excited, people who told me that they had a brown thumb and they just looked at a plant and it died, squealing with delight when something grew. It was like, in spite of their best efforts, something grew. Now, I'm inherently lazy, so I really identify with that. Then there are all the side effects, the positive side effects of gardening. There's physical activity. We don't all need to go to the gym and run around on a treadmill and look like a lab rat, just exercising. We can go out in the garden and get some sunshine and get fit. And you know, feel really smug about it, because you're feeling fit, you're beautifying an area. You can take up a bit of median grass. Now, I called it guerrilla gardening because I was inspired by actually a TEDx talk about guerrilla gardening, where people were taking back common land from the town, taking disused areas and growing things. But I also like alliteration, so it sounded good. But we were really guerrilla gardening light, I would say, because the guerrilla part was us taking back the people, taking back the power for themselves to be able to feed themselves. But we weren't the piece of it which I aspire to, the next piece of it, which I would call gung-ho guerrilla, if I'm going to split it up. Where we really look around and we say, there's a piece of land doing nothing, and it could be feeding people. Where people could, as they walk into the town hall, grab a cherry tomato from the plant that's growing there amongst the azaleas or whatever else is being put there. And in growing those things, start the conversation about, well, what is the management that you're doing for these plants? Because if people are eating them, we don't want all the pesticides and herbicides that are being sprayed there. So start shifting the format of the gardening style as well, and landscaping. It helps us develop a real relationship to food. The famous kids who won't try things, spring from the famous adults who don't try things. But both kids and adults, when they've grown something, will be that much more, and I'm not saying will be because I'm prophesying it, I'm basing it on the evidence of seeing it, that much more curious to try something. So get involved, get your hands dirty, and it builds confidence. People who don't think they can do something, who don't think they have any control in their life, who are overwhelmed by whatever, and have the satisfaction and triumph of growing some food from just a little speck of that looks like nothing in your hand. It's a wonderful thing. There's always something you can grow. As I said before, I'm lazy. My parenting style is a lot like my gardening style. I believe in benign neglect. You give just enough and then you step back. The problem is you get really independent kids who are going to be flying out in the big bad world or a pain in the ass to live with. And it's the same with the vegetables.